Welcome in on a Mondays. Good afternoon, Michigan football. Hope everybody had a great weekend. Maybe you checked out the Wolverines and the Combine over the weekend. We'll get you up to speed on that and talk about the latest and what's going on with Michigan and in college football and everything that's going on with the Wolverines. And Michigan, as you may have guessed, was well represented, and they won the weekend. If there was a winner in Indy, it was Michigan, the University of Michigan, the players, the university as a whole, the football program, Sharon Moore. They walked out there with another dub. It felt like Michigan won a game. If you were keeping track of all of that, I was, and I'll explain a little bit more on that. But it was the Combine, and that's top of mind, and that's where we start with Michigan. You know, with how things are going right now, I saw somebody today on Twitter, and he was complaining about Michigan's lack of additions in the transfer portal and Michigan's lack of additions via the recruiting trail. And there were a few people, and I thought, well, there'll be people that will call them out. There'll be a couple people that say, join the Natty. That's what I was guessing that people were going to say. But the majority of them are like, yeah, like, you know, like, what's going on? Complaining about the NIL. I knew that would have been one. But, and then I thought, is there real reason to be squirrely right now about Michigan? And, you know, my answer is no. There's no reason. Is there a reason to be upset that Michigan hasn't added people in the transfer portal? Well, remember they have added two. They tried to add a few more, but because of the national championship and then how long Michigan had to play till January the 8th, and then that Jim Harbaugh went all the way to January 24th, it did affect Michigan and their ability to bring players in on the transfer portal with that uncertainty. That was part of it. So, you know, you take that every single time, you know, with the national championship. So there is a little bit, there's a point about that. And it's the same thing with recruiting with the uncertainty there. Now, I've been at this long enough to know that if there's just a dry spell in recruiting, people just get antsy. You just need that fuel, and the fuel comes in the shape and size. In this instance, an actual name of somebody. Then you bet Michigan's now they got it going, you know, and it just primes the pump. And then of course you want more and more. And when there's this dry spell, it does tend to have people, you know, they don't have anything else. Like you know, college football fans are great. That's number one for me too. But some people are just so into college football that it becomes the season of just complaining about your team if they don't have something, and you know that the things are going sideways. And it's not necessarily, you know, going sideways. I'm not over here telling everybody, oh, it's great. But I would say then the two things. One is that the transfer portal is closed right now, and it opens back up in April. Do I think Michigan is going to be active in the transfer portal? I do. I think that they'll be looking for slot corner help, and they'll be looking for big targets at wide receiver. That's what they were looking at before, and they struck out with the wide receiver and the DB. So I would imagine that they'd go back there, and they might be entertaining some quarterbacks as well. And they do pay with NIL when it comes to the transfer portal. You can recall last year, somebody asked me, what's the difference between why Michigan will pay upfront money for the transfer portal, just technically against the rules? Certainly tampering is, but they won't, or they haven't previous to this year, we all think, when it comes to recruiting. I asked that question to somebody who knows a little bit about it, and he said he thought that the distinction is that when you're talking about somebody who's in a transfer portal, that is a college player. It's not a recruit. It's not a high school prospect. And that is the argument. that Michigan, whether you think it's correct or not, or the letter of the law when it comes to the NCAA, the bylaw, the violation, or anything, what's going on with the antitrust that can drive you crazy, all this other stuff with Tennessee, and it looks like the floodgates are open now, and now you can pay everybody. All of that, I'm just talking about prior to where the situation was, is that it was viewed as Michigan, if you're in the transfer portal, yeah, you can say, hey, this is what we have for you. And that's not tampering. That is having a discussion with somebody who is in the transfer portal, yes, about guaranteed money. But the distinction is that they are already in college. They're not a prospect, and they're not in high school. And that's where Michigan's at. Now, Michigan has to take, you say they need to take a long look at it. They're taking a look at it. It's you watch and listen to a lot of college football folks, experts, media types, people that have podcasts, national, local, all these things, radio, television. You're looking at all of it. And everybody's talking about NIL and money. And Michigan, whether they're taking a long look at it, it's changing. It is a fluid situation. 2 weeks ago, we had this antitrust thing, and then just last week, the NCAA said, "Yeah, we're not enforcing." They didn't say they weren't enforcing it; they're just not looking at it right now, which basically just said, "Go ahead, you want to pay people, go ahead and do it." Even though technically that's not it, but that's the signal that everybody understood, and I understand. And now, does Michigan understand it? I think a lot of it has to do with strategy when it comes down to name, image, and likeness, and just how they're going to approach that. Now, so that would be the first thing. And then with recruiting, I don't expect Michigan to be pulling in a bunch of five-star, even though they just won the national championship, even though they just won 3 Big Ten titles in a row. I don't think there was going to be a windfall of 5 stars. And some of that does have to do with Michigan's previous stance and strategy of how they're approaching the top-ranked kids. Maybe that'll change, but I don't expect that to. Like, I would expect Michigan to have a top 15 recruiting class, but not a top 5. So somewhere between 6 and 15. That's if I had to guess right now. But things do change. They could really crank it up when it comes to recruiting and NIL and jump right in with both feet. I know a lot of people want them to do that. I want them to do that myself. I would rather have Michigan closer to 5 than 15 when it comes to recruiting overall. And to do that, they're going to have to change their strategy. I hope they do. And I do expect them to be active in the transfer portal and be able to add some players. So all of that is their reason to be squirrely about Michigan football right now. On a scale from 1 to 10, like 1, you're completely freaking out. Like this program's a joke. And they should start firing people. Somebody needs to be on the chopping block. Or 10, you're just perfectly chill and everything's going great. I'm not a 10, but I gotta believe I'm an 8. Can I talk myself into being a 9? I'm feeling pretty good about everything. I think you should feel pretty good about everything too. But trying to tell people to relax or not get worried about stuff. Like, people like to be worried about stuff. People like talking about it. People like to freak out. So, do whatever you want that way. That's my advice for all of it when it comes down to it. Let's take some of the feedback. Old Antoine is first up, and it's good to see him. He says Michigan just got Kevin Wilkins and another brain inside the program. That's what you do. Stockpile talent, cultivated, growing, and when you need it, you reach inside your own bag. Go Blue. I did see that Michigan and Wilkins, he would be, you're talking about a analyst, and Brad Hawkins, the former Wolverine safety member, I guess it was 3 years ago now, he made the big fumble recovery at the end of the Nebraska game. Hawkins' name had been out there. I saw just before we came on that he is joining it seemed like in official capacity as a graduate assistant to Michigan. So yeah, Wilkins, analyst, Hawkins. I'm not familiar with Wilkins' background, but yeah. So there you go. Let's go to SW Lion. He says it's tough to add people in the transfer portal when you don't know whether or not Jim Harbaugh is coming back. The new staff in place should help recruiting when the transfer portal reopens in April. Great point. AJ says Michigan fans forever whining. They don't even keep up with the team or the recruiting. I bet if you asked one of them, they couldn't tell you the first thing about recruiting. Yeah, it's Michigan fans. It's popular teams. I recall, when was the last time? It probably was 2 years ago. So Alabama. You'd point to Alabama, certainly 2 years ago. It's about, who were the blue bloods, who were the top programs? Alabama. If it's not the first name out of your mouth, it'd have been the second name out of your mouth. So I am on the rivals.com Alabama message board one day. I'm going down there. I'm like, well, what's it like? You're the cat's meow. You're a Bama fan. Are you just sitting back and like, yeehaw, we're the best? No, they were complaining. They were complaining about recruiting, that, I couldn't get so-and-so. Saban had some ties with his daddy and he's turned his back on him. They were all upset about recruiting. And I'm looking, I had to check my phone, like, Alabama's in the top 5 in recruiting. They were just going bonkers about it down there. So it happens everywhere. People say that like Michigan fans aren't happy unless they're whining. That's fan bases. That's the way it goes. Now, fan bases that haven't had any success and then they have some success, it's a little bit different for them. I recall also, now that I'm just going back, in that 5-10 years ago maybe, and it was Michigan State basketball. And I was interacting with some Michigan State basketball fans on Twitter. And I know that's a little dangerous proposition to begin with, interacting with people on Twitter. But it was a first-round game. And it was probably a little closer first-round game. I don't even remember which one it was, but that's not the point. And I was like, yeah, Coach Shea for Michigan State. And one of the Spartan fans came on and said, oh, yeah, we don't worry about Michigan State until they get to the Final Four. And I was like, worry about tournament games? You're not even interested? He's like, no, we've been to the tournament 20 years in a row. It's not like it's that big of a deal. And I was like, wow. But then there was like some confirmation about that. It's like, and some were taking some shots at me because I knew, as a Michigan fan, you expect a little bit of that. But there was a theme there, and that, of course we're watching our team, but we're expecting to get to the Final Four. It's not a good season unless we get to the Final Four. And it used to be like that with the Detroit Red Wings. Detroit Red Wings making the playoffs for close to 30 years in a row. And you'd have a great regular season game. And sure enough, somebody would say, just the regular season, I don't start getting interested to the playoffs. I understand that. There's some hockey fans that are just interested when it gets to the playoffs. But then when you get to the playoffs, it's like, I'm not going to be all wrapped up in a first round series. You're not even getting wrapped up in the first round series. Then it became like, wake me up when we get to the Western Conference Finals. Oh, I don't know. Like, so there's all kinds of fans that way, that kind of stuff. Let's look. There's some feedback on the combine, and Scott's the first one to say something. He says, look for JJ McCarthy to go in the top 15. Top 15, if I had to guess right now, I would bet JJ McCarthy goes in the top 10. JJ McCarthy, as expected, was going to make a further name for himself in Indianapolis And he did that by participating, by throwing where you get picked apart when you're over there and you throw. And I thought he helped himself. Now, there were some throws that he missed on, but the thing is, if you go out there, the couple of throws that JJ over to the left that, that he missed and sailed one or two, if he would have gone on there and been pinpoint in, I don't know, two or three of those throws, I'd be talking about him having a perfect combine and maybe him knocking on the door at number 2. That's what he had. And the combine is, for me, it's just a lot of fun. It's just a piece. Some people get turned off, like these guys are just running around in shorts. There's nothing to be had. They are just running around in shorts, but just a little bit. It's just a piece of the puzzle. It's not as much as you have your idea and you watch the game film, but you take, for example, Cornelius Johnson. Cornelius Johnson wasn't in a pass-heavy offense. He made some big plays for Michigan. Think to last year at Ohio State when he scored the 2 touchdowns in the first half, which were awesome. But then he goes out and he posts one of the greatest combine scores ever when you put it all together. His RAS in 25, number 25, and they've been doing this, for 20 years, 25 years of the combine. Great job by Kojo there. So he helped himself. Here's the thing, that when people were getting down on Caleb Williams and Drake May and Jaden Daniels for throwing, if I was Caleb Williams, or I was Caleb Williams' agent, or I was Caleb Williams' dad, or I was Caleb Williams' coach, he said, should I throw at Indy? I would say, no. You have nothing to gain. You're going to be the number 1 overall pick. Don't throw. Now, I don't know about that medical thing that he went through. Didn't want to reveal the medicals. At some point, you're going to have to cough that stuff up, I believe. But if you're one of the top 3 picks, why would you throw? Now, JJ and the guys that did throw somewhere in the mid, they can really, if you can help yourself, you throw. If you can hurt yourself, you don't throw. It's as easy as that. Sometimes you have to walk people through that when it comes to, and it's like that with all of the things in the combine. Scott asking a question, if I would take Blake Corum in the second round, I would in a minute. A steal. I think that Corum, is going to be a fantastic pro. And so if I know that I am getting a rock solid running back who I can depend on, and is somebody that I'm pretty sure is, I don't know about a sure thing, whatever. Do I think about that in the second round? I would say it depends where I'm at in the second round. I think Corum's going to be a 3rd round back. And I think the team that's going to select him is going to be very happy. So if you're a 3rd round pick and you're a good 3rd round pick and you're a steal in the 3rd round, I don't think Corum, I wouldn't put the label on him as a steal in the second round. Although if you're going to end up being a fabulous back, and I think he is, I wouldn't think that team is reaching or going crazy if they took Corum. Running backs, and I know what Jahmyr Gibbs, it was my whole thing with, in the Lions, it worked out really well for them last year. I didn't like them taking Gibbs in the top 10. I thought you don't do that with running backs. You get them later in the draft. And so that's that would be my approach. That's more of a philosophical thing. And so I would have nothing against Corum. It's more against the position that he's playing. I would have him down a little bit. So I would not put him as a steal in the second round. Okay, people are arguing with each other. I kind of I like that sometimes. SW Lion coming back and saying Michigan won titles without getting a lot of 5 stars. They do need to continue having success recruiting good players. If they can be in the top 15 with good coaching, I like their chances. Yeah, I think that I'm in agreement with you, SW Lion. That's where we're at. I'm not really sure what's going on. We just have people arguing here. Here's old OT. I'm so pumped for CJ. He put on a show. He is so much better than people said. Yeah, he did a great job. He did shine. JJ did as well. The thing with JJ, this is one thing that I think we knew, and maybe that we do know, is that, and it started on Thursday with Chris Jenkins. Chris Jenkins, what a spokesperson for Michigan, rooting for his teammates. He's a national champ. He's got a great personality. He's talking about his time in Ann Arbor. He's got his gigantic $1 million smile. Whatever team gets him, first question out of their mouth, or first question out of the reporter's mouth, going to be like, what about your time at Michigan? And he's going to glow and he's going to light up. He's going to be great ambassador. Cornelius Johnson's not really outspoken. He's more of a soft-spoken a type a player. Not I call him a typical wideout. They're more brash and look at me kind of. That's not Kojo at all. Kojo, I think if he wasn't going into football, it seems like he could be a professor. A very thought-provoking, thought through when he's going through his stuff. But he will also be someone, and I think that this is part of it. So this is a Amazing Blue podcast. But Michigan did just win the national championship. But I think that Chris Jenkins would be a great pick. I think that Corum would be a great pick. I think JJ's going to succeed. I think Sainer still, the playmaker out there, ran well. And, people ask me, well, oh, you think Sainer still is going to be a good pro? Yes, I do. It wouldn't surprise me if Mike Sainer still was winning Super Bowls and is a lockdown corner, is making plays for his team. And you know what I'll do? I'll say, I'm not surprised at all. That's what he did. After playing 3 years for wide receiver at Michigan, he moved over to the defensive side of the ball, and he looked like not only did he belong there, he looked like a technician, smooth as can be. And then he got better. And then you listen to Sainer still talk, and it takes about 1 minute. You're like, this guy is too good to be true. Whatever this guy does. Sainer still, after he's done football, I don't know about broadcasting. I think a general manager. He's got, and part of him being a GM, he'll go back and say, when I was at Michigan, Josiah Stewart was from my neck of the woods, and he was in Coastal Carolina. And I told the Michigan staff, go after and get Josiah Stewart. Michigan did do that, and it worked out. You listen to Sainer still talk, and you're a fan of him after a minute, and it goes on and on like that. Now, there were a lot of people, and you understand this to a point, that were upset at Jim Harbaugh. Right off the bat, January the 24th, when he left, January the 25th, people are like, I'm not rooting for him. You get upset. There's some people that got it, but you actually understood people that were like, man, could have been, just think about if he would have stayed around. So you got that part. But then when he started rating the staff and he took Ben Herbert, people didn't like that. And he kept going. And then he kept going and taking everybody. Then people turned on. There were a lot of people that turned on Harbaugh. And you had, it was kind of back and forth, little Maison Blue crime and all of that. But things have settled down. Michigan has their staff. Are we really? I know Herbert was a big loss and everything, but Michigan can overcome it. I go through all that because there was a moment in Indianapolis where Harbaugh was in the stands and he was sitting next to his kid, and his kid pointed up, and the fans started cheering. There are a lot of Michigan fans that went to the combine. Big surprise. Driving distance and a bunch of Maize and Blue players working out. And they were cheering for Harbaugh. And he had a Rose Bowl Michigan pullover on, and he pointed to it and recognized the crowd. And you may not have thought that was a big moment. I did. That he's wearing his Michigan stuff. I know that he still likes Michigan, and you really know it too. to see him do that, I think it maybe was able to connect with some of those Michigan fans who were upset with him. But I thought it was I don't know, a big deal, but I liked it. It reminded me after I saw it, and the Tigers did not win the World Series in 2006, but they made it to the World Series. They won the AL pennant. Kind of came out of nowhere and did it. And then the next year, it was a preseason. Well, let me think how this went down. Was it? It couldn't have been the next year. So it would have been during the 2006 season when the Tigers are in first place, and it was a preseason Lions game, and I was down in the stands, and Leland was sitting over in the section. Jim Leland was going into the Hall of Fame this year, and they put him up on the big screen, and Leland put his hand up in the air. What I think is that now that I'm thinking about the timing, the preseason is going to be in late August, early September. So maybe the Tigers were on their way to. I don't know, you play them back to back. Maybe they had to be done. They must just been having a good year. But the point is that he was recognized by the crowd, and once you win that national championship, everywhere you go, and it's still happening. People are talking about Michigan. What about the national championship? National championship this, national championship that. Congratulations. Here he is, the world champ. And I thought that was pretty cool seeing that in Indianapolis. Let's get a few more here with the feedback. And we are back to Antoine. The combine does not prove you can play football. It just proves that you're an athlete. That's fine. I think that's good. We had better athletes than anyone gave us credit for the past 3 years, says Richard. Scott asking about Joe Milton at the combine. I do know he had the fastest throw with JJ at number 2. When you have a player like Joe Milton, he is made for the combine. You put Joe Milton in some bicycle shorts and a tight shirt, you put him out there, everybody's like, who's this guy? I want this guy. And then you watch him throw the football 80 yards, a little flip of the wrist. And you're like, this guy's got to be the number 1 pick of the draft. And then, Joe Milton was made for the combine. So yeah, he did fabulous. They'll watch the tape of Joe Milton. They'll be like, oh, boy, that's a rocket for 75 yards. Oh, he overshot the guy by 10 yards. That's Joe Milton. $1 million arm for Joe. If you're invited to the combine, you should work out. Says OT. I've been through that. I disagree with him. Mark says key positions are D tackles and quarterback. No material weaknesses. Which ones? Exploitable weaknesses can defeat any exceptional competences. Key position. Key position definitely quarterback. D tackle. What's the key position on defense? You're saying right in the middle. Give me a defensive end that's going to be able to get to the quarterback more than a D tackle. They're all important, but I'll go. And Mark, if you look at, I don't know if we're talking about the NFL, we're talking about college football. I think both it's defensive end or edge at Michigan. But when you look at the franchise tag numbers, you will see that the most important positions, according to how much they have allotted on offense, it's quarterback, followed by left tackle, now followed by wide receiver. Those are the top 3. On defense, number 1, defensive end. Number 2, I think, is corner or safety. 3 probably is defensive tackle after that. So there we go. Let's see what Free Climb is saying. Every athlete can be an NFL player. Every NFL player is an athlete. We're kind of circling around. Yeah, dogging the combine is. There's a story. Jerry Rice ran a 4.6 in today's football. He would be a late round pick. Yeah, not necessarily about that. He was at a smaller school, and so that can work against you. But you put up the kind of numbers that Jerry Rice did, and he would still be picked pretty high. I think that if you don't like it's the same thing when the guys go work out like the high school quarterbacks and people get all upset. Somebody said, "Oh, he had a good day." Well, he's just there's no rush. These guys are just throwing the football. Here's what you need to do. You need to put it in perspective. Yeah, we know that there's not a rush. We know that they're not wearing a helmet. We know that they're just throwing the football. So put that into context. It is the same thing with the combine. Guys that when JJ McCarthy was running around throwing the football, it was the same thing. There weren't guys coming in, but you are able to see how he does with particular throws. It's like that with the offensive lineman and all of that. But it can be an exercise to everyone's point that some people take it a little bit too far. Joe Alt, the skyscraper offensive tackle, is going to be the first tackle picked in the draft out of Notre Dame. He had some kind of drill where I watched him. He almost fell over to the right. Then he was backpedaling, and somebody's like, "This guy's clumsy. I wouldn't even take him." It's like, okay, well, and then somebody pointed out, so he had that drill, but then the guy came in and said, well, he had the best 3 cone since Lane Johnson. And so there's all these things like Blake Corum ran a 4.53, which isn't like the burning speed where you would think about the possibility like, well, he would be a first round pick. He's not going to be a first round pick with a 4.53, but there was a video of him going through some drills where he was cutting and running over some bags, and the guy that ran faster than him, they did this side by side, the thing that they do, and you could just see Corum with his cuts and how much faster that he was from this guy. And if you're watching, and if you're an NFL GM and you see that, and you're like, I'm taking Corum over this guy. There's a reason when you look at the speed that the top 10 fastest wide receivers posted at the combine, there's really no household names in there. You look at it and you're kind of like, none of those guys are great football players. Now you'd expected to see Jefferson, Chase, Tyreek Hill. No, those guys are not in the top 10 all time. It must be, a couple 90 years have gone by, because here's Hadley, who is joining us. We feel so privileged and special who's coming in. He says, it was nice to see Ron Bellamy getting a 2-year extension and a nice raise. Your thoughts? Well, Ron Bellamy got nearly over a 60% raise, and they added a title to wide receivers. I don't have that title right in front of me, like, the assistant head coach or whatever it is. I think Ron Bellamy is the perfect coach for college. He is, and I can recall Hadley interviewing him a couple of years ago when I was helping out in Ann Arbor radio. And when he was at West Bloomfield as the head coach, and talking with somebody's not everything. You listen to him and go, wow, this guy's a great talker. But Bellamy is. You just talk football with him for 5-10 minutes in the interview, and you come away and you feel good about yourself. You're like, that guy is going to do it. And I know his family a little bit. He's got a great family. And then you look at what kind of football coach he is and what he's been able to do. And I know people like, even on here, like he doesn't have his guys running sophisticated enough routes, or there's people that complain about Ron Bellamy as a coach. They complain about everything, but Ron Bellamy is he's in a well-deserved raise. He is a fine addition to Michigan, and I predict one day that he will be a head coach in college, and he'll be a lifer in the sport, and he'll make some team really happy that he ends up being the top dog. Oh, maybe it'll be at Michigan one day. Who knows? But yeah, you're looking at somebody who's a huge fan of Ron Bellamy, Hadley. So I think it's a great move for Michigan. Ferris says JJ was a borderline first round pick when he declared. Now he is a top 12, maybe top 6. Yeah, I think that's how he was viewed nationally. But around here, if you listen to people that at least have been around the block a few times, not that are total like simps for Michigan, like every single guy, like, he's the greatest. Are you kidding me? He's Michigan. But and people accused me. I had to look up what a simp was, because last year I said in the summer that I thought J.J. McCarthy was only behind Caleb Williams. And I put out my list. I watched Drake May, and it's like, yeah, Drake May's not blowing me away where I'm watching him thinking, oh, yeah, and I like Jaden Daniels more. If I go back, I'm going to have to do that, go back and see my list. But I had McCarthy there, and people were accusing me of just being this like Michigan homer. We watch him. And, it's interesting to hear the experts talk about him like, well, limited offense. But no, when you see him, you're like, wow, everything that he can do. JJ's a fabulous athlete. And then he can stand in the pocket. First thing you got to do when you're a quarterback in the pros, you got to be able to get the ball from the pocket on schedule and be able to deliver the football everywhere on the field. Down the field, 35 yards. You've got to be able to do all of that. And he can do that. Now, sometimes the ball can wobble a little bit. He can get better at that. And then you go to everything else. He does everything else. He can throw it literally from every angle on the field, running around, pirouetting, all of that stuff, escapability. He's got it. And then all of the intangibles, we all saw that. So I figured that J.J. McCarthy would be, in the end, a top 10 pick. That was even going into this year. And then this year, that just solidified it. So that's why when a lot of people were predicting, oh, he'll come back, he's not ready. Like, it's not really about being ready. It's about where you're going to get picked. He's going to get picked pretty high, Ferris. That's it. Antoine, looking back to last year and the Colts picking up Anthony Richardson because he was fast. Well, not just because he was fast, Antoine. If you watched Anthony Richardson, I remember the first time I watched him, it was against Utah. And Anthony Richardson looked like a bigger, stronger, faster Lamar Jackson. This guy was incredible. He could throw it. He could run it. He could run over people. He could lower his shoulder. He got a little bit banged up and didn't have quite. I thought when I saw him, like, this guy's going to be the number 1 pick. You only have to watch Anthony Richardson for a couple minutes. And it doesn't matter if you're at the you watch him play football. This guy could play defensive end for you. This guy could play wide receiver, tight end. Put him at quarterback. If Anthony Richardson stays healthy, he will be one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. Now, how he is able to, when you're a football player and you play like a middle linebacker, can he dial it down a little bit there? JJ's had to work at that. I remember JJ right off the bat. Remember his first throw when he was running around, he threw it across the field, everything else. It's like, wow, this guy is Patrick Mahomes. He had to stop all of that. Richards is going to have to work at it a little. So here we are. Ferris. Ferris wants to help this channel out. He says, hit the like button. Yeah, I would say thank you, Ferris. Hit the like button. If you're listening on the podcast, please leave a comment. I would like more comments. I would like more feedback. You don't like the show. You wish I would, be more like this guy. I talk too much. Give me more inside information. Whatever it is, I would like comments. Now, just like all of us in recruiting, I like the 5-star rating. So anybody that gives me a 5-star, we appreciate that. Tell a friend that's a college football fan to subscribe to the Maize and Blue Review. AJ coming back and saying today's measurables, Mikey's a little round pick because he's small in size while neglecting his football IQ and tenacity. I don't know if this means you think that Mike Sainristil will be a late round pick. Mike Sainristil, it's okay to be a 5'10", to be a nickelback. He's going to be fine. I think that he'll go in the second and third round. If he goes into the fourth, that'll be a great pick for whoever gets him. FK pulling out the Barry Sanders speed. And you bring up Barry Sanders, we might be sitting here for a long time. Me talking about Barry Sanders. FK says Barry Sanders got caught from behind many times. However, he was still super deluxe. Barry was asked about getting caught from behind. And then the next game, he ran like a 60-yarder and outran a bunch of people. But did Barry have, 4.3 speed? Did Barry have, the speed of Chris Johnson from the Titans? No, I think it's a fair point. Barry Sanders is one of the greatest running backs of all time, but, that he's very unique. There's been guys who have sort of looked like him at times, but there's only been one, Barry Sanders. Also, Barry Sanders was not all that great in short yardage situations. Didn't have the breakaway speed, wasn't all that great in short yardage situations, yet one of the greatest. Nobody, especially here, a lot of people would put him at number one, but you're not putting together a top 5 all-time running backs with Barry Sanders not included in the top 5. Unless you're Sal Palantonio, he'll put him at 25 or something like that. Like seeing some backpedaling on JJ. FK mentioning Kiper. I don't know, the first Mel Kiper mock, he had JJ going to the Seahawks at what are they at? 21, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, right in there. I don't know how much backpedaling that is. He likes him even more. But that's where we're at. Now we're getting here to Ferris, who says, could Usain Bolt have played receiver or defensive back? I would say probably not. Now, the NFL history is littered with players that were great track stars and then tried to play football and with some limited success. Let's go back and think of them. It's a fun thing to think about. The first name that I think of is Bullet Bob Hayes. Bullet Bob Hayes, who played for the Cowboys, who was an Olympian, I believe, and pretty good NFL player. The next guy that I think of, go back, was a San Francisco 49er named Ronaldo Nehemiah. Also, I think he was a hurdler. Pretty good football player. There have been others. Remember Florida, or was it Florida or Tennessee, had a kid named Gatlin. Now, Gatlin was also, he was an Olympic hopeful. I don't know, maybe he was an Olympic. I don't know. I get confused on that with the track, but, he never made it. And then there was, who was the receiver for the Willie Gault I think was also a big track guy. Track guys and football players, those things go hand in hand, but we're talking about the very elite. Like Bo Jackson. Was Bo Jackson an alternate on some kind of Olympic team? Say some kind of like a track and field. So I'm talking about, the best here. So Bo Jackson, Bullet Bob Hayes, Ronaldo Nehemiah. If you start going through the list, there are probably some that you'll be able to come up with and say, oh, yeah, that was the guy. I remember growing up, the Commanders, back when they were the Redskins, they had a corner named Darrell Green. He seemed like he was the fastest. They would have these wide world of sports things in the off season, and Green always beat everybody in running. And I think he was a track guy too. There's a difference, a track guy playing football and a football player, running track. Like the one thing that gets, I think, confused, and it might have been Antoine's point earlier, you can do a lot of things that show your agility and athletic ability. But when you play football, there's a toughness level required. When you're putting on that helmet, you are a real warrior. Yeah, like as much as I can talk about being a warrior without, going to, like, these guys are battling. You have to be a tough as nails type competitor to play this game. That's really what you're talking, and it's not out for everybody. I'll go back to Joe Milton. Joe Milton is the most talented wide receiver that was in Indianapolis. And to look at him, if you were constructing, say, let's build the perfect quarterback, you would put Joe Milton out there and say, this is the guy. Guy can throw the ball 80 yards. He's got the perfect physical, the physique. Just look at him. And yet, I don't think the toughness part of the game, it wasn't for him. You need a yard, he couldn't get it for you. You got to lower your shoulder and you have to be willing to pay the price. And I don't think he was. Doesn't mean he's a bad guy. It just means that, you got to be a gladiator when you're playing this game. So give me the football player that runs track, not vice versa. It reminds me of the Buckeye. Oh, who was the Buckeye? Ended up being not so shabby, but they always said, and his dad was a coach, and they were always like, and he almost, people would get him in fantasy, and then, I forget. But people always said, he's a track guy. He's not really a football player. And so that can happen. So I don't know. I don't know how tough Bolt is. Bolt couldn't take the hit. There's people talking Bolt. Usain Bolt has one route on the tree. Go. That's a good one. That's it. Bolt tried out for soccer. Richard's going to see the Tigers tomorrow. Richard, it's on a list somewhere. I wouldn't mind going to a spring training game. I have never been to a spring training game. That seems, what's not to like? Baseball, sunshine, sitting back. Doesn't matter who wins or loses. Sounds fun. I love it. Eric is ready to argue. He thinks that Bolt at 6'5" and being the fastest human man in human history, he thinks you could turn him into a wide receiver. I don't know. Farrah says he could have been like Calvin Johnson. You could have been. Looks like Calvin. Obviously faster than Calvin. But can he take a hit? Can he go over the middle with some DB ready to smack him in the face? That's what you got to figure out. Who's that Buckeye wide receiver? Ted Ginn Jr. Dad was a coach. Michigan was interested in a while, and there was a recruiting analyst was telling me, Ted Ginn, he's a track guy that's trying to play football, not the other way around. Now, look, Ginn was good at Ohio State, and he carved out a pretty nice NFL career. You can say that guy was wrong. Lion 26 has no hard feelings towards Jim Harbaugh at all. Head coach, he led Michigan to 3 straight Big Ten titles and their first sole national championship since 1947. There you go. Marty wants to know, in my opinion, is JJ the 3rd best quarterback in the NFL draft? Now, there you go, Marty. There, you get right to it. I said this about JJ, and you can say it's a cop-out, and maybe it is. That I wouldn't be surprised if JJ's the best out of any of these quarterbacks in this class. But here's the thing. With me being someone that watched every single snap that JJ took and being a big fan of JJ, when I hear Michigan fans or anybody in the Michigan media say, I'd take JJ number 1, he'll be the best. I'm like, you can say that, but you're just a big Michigan fan. Here's the way that I look at it. I think that there's 32 NFL teams. I think that 30 of them would take Caleb Williams. No question. At number 1. They would trade Fields and they would take Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams has the upside, and it appears that he has the highest ceiling of any quarterback in this draft. That is what GMs lean into. It's like Victor Wembanyama. You take somebody that looks like he could be the greatest player in the NBA. Caleb Williams looks like he could be the next Patrick Mahomes. His GM was at Kansas City when Mahomes was there, if I'm not mistaken on that. There's always one, though, and I'm even going to say there's 2 that might do something elsewhere. I would love myself, and I know this is going a long way without answering your question. I like the idea. The Commanders are 2, and Williams is from D.C. I would love to see them flip-flop 1 and 2 and pick up a future number 1 from the Commanders. Then I would like to see the Bears trade down another time or 2 and pick up like 4. Could they? And they could. They could pick up 4 future first-round picks. And they've already got, from doing it last year with Bryce Young. That's why they're in the position they are right now with Carolina's pick. But if they looked at this quarterback draft and said, there's 5 guys here, and any of these 5 could be the one, why not move down a little bit, get all these extra picks, and then just ride with them? I like the idea, and so this would be a little bit crazy, but let's just say they just go and they've got pick number 9, and they just sit back and chill and say, we're going to take one of the 5 quarterbacks that's there at 9. Maybe it's Bo Nix. Maybe it's J.J. McCarthy, whatever. And we'll just get these 4 or 5 extra picks, and then we'll take the quarterback there. Because I look at it, and I think J.J. can be as good as any of the guys that I've seen there. Meanwhile, like I said, if I was sitting at number 1, I would take Caleb Williams. But after that, from what I see, Daniels put up the incredible numbers, and and I think that I like JJ better than I like May, and yeah, I do like him better. I think he can be a better quarterback than Jaden Daniels. So I would say JJ's the 2nd best quarterback in this draft. But the part that's hard, and you may say this is not hard, but I find this to be the hard position. Put myself in the shoes of the general manager. And if I did that with the Bears, even though I just said of doing all that with all the other picks, I would take Williams. Getting the quarterback right is everything in the NFL. If you have to throw, it doesn't matter how much capital that you throw at it if you get the guy right. So I would take Caleb Williams. And that's how I would do it. So I would not take JJ. Now, when I get to the Commanders, what I would do is I would trade back a few slots, and I would take JJ. That's how I would do it. I think that after Williams, it could be a toss-up. But I'm not as high, and now I watched a lot this weekend, and people are not as high on Drake May. At first, it was like, oh, Drake May, Drake May, Drake May. People are not high on Drake May. You watch Drake May; he's never won a big ball game. I think people are getting Trubisky vibes because he was a Carolina guy. But what do? You watch him and you see him running around, and he never comes up big in a big spot. Why are you taking a guy like that? I saw Dan Orlovsky on Friday said, well, you take Drake May, but you can't play him for 2 years. Oh, is that what you're going to do? You're going to have the number 2 pick, and you're going to pick him, and then you're not going to play him for 2 years? You're going to be fired. You're going to be out of there. Basically, he was saying, he thinks he's going to be a bust. But, these quarterback things and getting it in the right spot with the right coaches and then surrounded by, you get Andy Reid with Patrick Mahomes. He doesn't have to play his entire first year. He's already with a good team, surrounded by a great cast. Why? It's the perfect situation. A couple of weeks ago, I put all the teams up there that are good situations for McCarthy and then put up the teams that are not. Like the Broncos. I don't want J.J. McCarthy going to the Denver Broncos. They're going to put him out there and play him immediately. I don't want to see him play. There's only so many C.J. Strouds. And Stroud went out there, they played him immediately, and he hit. That doesn't happen. What was the 2021 draft, the first 3 picks? Everybody said, Zach Wilson, bust. Trey Lance, bust. Trevor Lawrence, best quarterback in 15 years. Trevor Lawrence right now. Number 11 in that draft, Justin Fields. Going to get dealt. Soft market for him right now. You keep going in on all of that. I think about the draft that the Lions had the number 3 pick in, and Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow was great immediately, but the Burrows and the Strouds, that's not even a 50-50 thing. Who else was in that draft? Tua was in that draft. Tua, Herbert. The only reason that he played early was that Tyrod Taylor's trainer punctured his lung, or Herbert would have sat for a lot longer. And then Jordan Love was the first round pick in that draft, and he did sit for 3 years before he played, and then he looked pretty good this year. So my opinion of JJ, is he the 3rd best quarterback in the draft? The answer, I could have gone and just said no. I think he's the 2nd best quarterback in this draft, but he has a chance to be as good as any of these guys. I say that, and I haven't, you say I would like to watch a half dozen games with George. I watched Jaden Daniels play a little bit, and I liked him enough to put him up pretty high. If you go back to my rankings before this season, I was ahead of the curve on Daniels. I like him a lot. I like him better than May. So Williams, McCarthy, Daniels. I like Bo Nix. I don't know. Do I like Penix more than May? He had a nice, the medicals came back nice for the Southpaw Penix. Richard says the Bullet had the speed and the hands. I don't know how old you are, Richard. You remember the Bullet Bob Hayes. I like that. OT says the defensive tackles are the hardest to find. Mark says Aaron Donald chose defensive tackle in the key position that outdoes any other on D. Yeah, he's a little freakish, though, isn't he, Aaron Donald? You go out and find an Aaron Donald, but how many others after Aaron Donald? Aaron Donald's both a pass rusher and athletic enough. You put him at defensive end, you put him at defensive tackle. It's pretty crazy that way. There's nobody else like him. Old Andre says if you're stout on the front 4, you can stop the run and rush the passer without committing extra resources. And that is, if we're just going over some of the keys to be a good football team, being able to do that, it's going to help out your defense and everything else. Just enjoying taking the feedback and seeing what everybody else is saying here. FK likes the idea of a 2-quarterback system. Orgy plus Tuttle or Denigal. Give Orgy 40% of the plays at quarterback and let him stay in as a fullback or tight end for another 20% of the plays, overall run 65% of the time. Well, immediately, I don't like two quarterback systems. When you have two, you don't have one. However, there are a few examples, and Michigan may have an example that they can use like this. You go to the Tebow Leak situation when they won the national championship when Tebow was a freshman. Leak was the quarterback. They got into a short yardage situation. They brought Tebow in, and he was there. He was their short yardage back. Now you're tipping off your hand, but you know what Tebow can do. I think that's could be what Michigan could do. Let's say it's identical, but they're going to sprinkle in Orgy, certainly in short yardage situations, and maybe they have. When we saw it this year, an Orgy package. And the Orgy package was successful enough this year to know that Orgy is going to be a factor anyways, to your point here, FK, even if I don't like it, playing in two quarterbacks. But I don't like the idea of playing two, have him in at fullback. I have to think a lot more about that. Eric is back talking about franchise tag values for safeties are the lowest on defense, and they're slightly ahead of tight end for all positions. So I think I mentioned corners, but then I had safeties. What's interesting about that, Eric, there was a time, now maybe it's been 10 years, that when you had a safety that all of the teams, when it was Palomalu was the safety for the Steelers, and the glowing example is when the Colts were good and they had Bob Sanders. When Bob Sanders was in the lineup, the Colts were like number one against the pass and top five against the rush. When he was out, they were in the bottom five. It was like these guys were like the keys. Ed Reed with the Ravens. Palomalu, Sanders, that era, like they had these great safeties, and all of these teams, you're like, you get great safety play. But I believe you when it comes down to the franchise tags, and things do change. All right. We get a few more here. OT's talking about faith in the combine. I don't think people put too much faith in the combine. Only a few teams get enamored with the combine performances, mostly the Raiders. Good point, OT. The Raiders love the combine. The Raiders. So what you're saying, OT, is Kojo's going to the Raiders. Oh, no. Xavier Worthy is going to be – Xavier Worthy is being mocked to the Raiders now. I'm with you on that. Why is the combine always in Indy, and why not in Detroit sometimes? It's a good question. It's because Indy does such a great job. Now, there's a lot of places that could do a good job. I mean, you'd say, well, you just have to have the football players in, Lucas Oil. Ford Field kind of looks like, all of these like dome stadiums, they're kind of similar. Having been a few times for basketball tournaments in Indianapolis, they're a little downtown area. And now you get like the media snobs. Like you look at all those media snobs, they all point to like 4 or 5 places. They're all in walking distance from their hotels and the stadium. So that's why they like it. And really everyone, you get down there, but what place doesn't have a nice walking area? But they all, Indy does seem perfect when you're there. You're there, and it's like, oh, hey, look at here's a nice bar. Here's one right next door. But hell, a lot of cities have nice bars and nice places to go. If we're only talking about walking distance for bars in the hotel, in having hotels, Indy does do it right, but there could be plenty of other places that could do it. It used to be like for the basketball tournament. It's like it's a central location for the Big Ten. Well, they're in Minneapolis this year. They're going to be going out to Vegas because of the the Pac-4 that's coming in, everything now. But it's a good question. I think the media gets kickbacks at St. Elmo's. That's why they like it so much too. Sean taking a shot at Detroit. Well, Sean, Indy is nice and not a blank hole like Detroit. What I think you're going to see from Detroit, Sean, is that you take the Campus Martius area where they're going to have the NFL draft and and extend it out where you're just a street down and you have the waterfront and the Renaissance Center and all that right there. That's as nice as Indianapolis. I'll go drop you off a couple places in Indianapolis, Sean, and you come back and you talk your trash. Get out of here. Nobody is thinking of you, Sean, as anybody that needs any more of that. That's right, Ralph. People that talk bad about Detroit have never been there. Calvin likes Indy. We have the same leaders who made Detroit what it is. I think that's kind of a shot at both cities. Here's Silly Sean. Silly Sean says orgy equals Devin Gardner 2.0. Oh, silly Sean. The poster formerly known as Andre says, I guess my point, but given your experience, you understand the commitment it takes to compete at a high level. Here's the people backing up Devin. I wish orgy is as good as Devin. I think Devin was this close. So there's some elements of Orgy's game that I hope that he does play like Devin Gardner. So that's it. Vic says Gardner was a good QB. Hoke was a terrible coach. Weighing in on Detroit now, and there we are. Hey, I want to play a couple things. I thought this was the winning sound. If you did not hear this, this was Sharon Moore goes up into the booth with Rich Eisen, who, of course, was reveling in the time in Indy, being a Michigan fan and everything else. And then Sharon Moore goes up in the booth, and Daniel Jeremiah is there, and this was the winning sound from the weekend. Here is Daniel Jeremiah on the NFL Network.
Coach, I was talking to an offensive line coach this morning who's met with just about everybody that's come through here this year. And he said the Michigan guys are like 2 years ahead of everybody in terms of their knowledge, their understanding, their maturity. What is it? What's been special about that place? What have you guys been able to put into these guys to get them so prepared?
Yeah. How about teeing one up? You think Sharon Moore like that question? Hey, Sharon, you're the head coach now, but previously you're offensive line coach and offensive coordinator. Previous to that, your offensive line coach. And he says, hey, you guys are better than everybody. Talk about throwing him up, teeing one up for Sharon Moore. But that's the kind. When people were so mad about Conti, Ben Herbert, and everybody leaving and everything else, that's the kind of stuff that you want to hear. That was the winning sound from the weekend. I also thought Harbaugh wearing his Michigan top and getting the ovation from the Michigan fans and being recognized as the national champion head coach. And then I'll go down the list and talk about all the guys from Corum, the Kojo, the Jenkins, and all these guys talking about Michigan and winning the national championship and what it did for them and what they'll bring to whatever team drafts them. That was all there. So great win for Michigan in Indy this week. Everybody came off great. Here's the picture of old coach there. That's when he was on TV, and he came close, but this is kind of this is the fun part of Harbaugh. He did have the Rose Bowl pullover on, and then when his kid alerted him that he was up on the screen, and he did recognized the Michigan fans. He went to point to the top, and he pointed to the opposite side, not where the logo was. But hey, that's pure Harbaugh. That's it. Ooh. All right. Was there anything else? Did I run through all of the players here? Liked McCarthy. Corum had a good weekend. I didn't see much about Barnhart. I watched him doing some drills. Barrett didn't run. Trente Jones, I saw him doing some stuff. Jenkins was out there earlier. Kojo had an amazing week. Both, I did see Keegan. Zinner's banged up. We know that. Saw something from Nugent. Samerstill was great. Wilson, when you run a 4.4 and people are disappointed, that's going to say a lot. Wait, I would expect him to come out at his pro day and do pretty good. All right. Thanks so much for joining us here today. A couple reminders if you're like, why are you talking about the basketball team? After every Michigan basketball game, there's a Michigan basketball post-game show. Go on this very feed right now on the podcast or on YouTube. And if you like to hear somebody screaming and yelling about the Michigan basketball program, I did that yesterday after the game. Also, prior to this show, 15 minutes before, I put together any Michigan sound, anything that's going on, recruiting with the transfer portal, and I put that in a nice and neat sports update for you Michigan fans. Somebody said, I don't want to watch or listen to an hour podcast of this guy, carrying on. And could you do a nice condensed version of like just the facts? And I said, hey, and you know what? I listened, and that's why there is the sports update now prior to this show, and it runs 5, 6, 7 minutes, and it's all there for you, and it gets you up to speed on everything that you want to know with Michigan. All right, 2 more quick things. I can't believe that it's March the 4th, and I feel like we need to turn on the air conditioner, but I'm not going to complain about that. But 67 degrees, I'm going outside, and I'm going to enjoy that. Monday, my wife brought home a can of Coke with the full sugar and everything in it. Not that I drink it very often, but I was like, she had this can of Coke, but she bought it because this can of Coke had there it is, had the Michigan National Championship logo on it. And so there it is. What I had planned on doing, you see it's open, is I was like, well, I'll take this Coke and I will put it in behind the glass and I will leave it there for as long as I live. And there it'll be, the Michigan National Championship Coke. But it was cold, so I drank it. And, whatever your collectible value is, what am I going to do? Save this for 20 years, and then somebody's like, hey, I'll give you $20 for it. I don't know, $200 for it. If it was unopened, it would be worth a lot more or whatever. But that's me with collectibles. I like looking at them and using them and going through them all. But I am going to tell everybody that I will save this can that I am showing you. For those of you listening on the podcast, it is a Coke can with the Michigan Championship logo on it. National Champs, it says. I will have this can for as long as I live. It'll be here. I don't know if it'll be right here on this desk, but it'll be here. It'll be with me forever. Wherever I go, they can just send that can with me. Send it on in. That's it. What Calvin's talking about. You can buy one for $4. Wow. My wife got this at a gas station. If she spent $4 on it, is it worth $4? She got me 2 of them. Is it worth $4? How much would it be regular? $1? I'd say $2. $4? That's too much. $4. There you go. I've got stories about my cards. There it is. That's right. It is valuable to me. That's all that matters. Okay. Thanks so much for watching. Is there anything going on? Recruiting, transfer portal. Will we get it? When's the next commitment? Those kind of things. That's where you join up with Amazing Blue Review, and that's when you find out what is going to happen, and that's why you join up. And then the conversation continues over there on the Den. So go to the Amazing Blue Review today by going to michigan.rivals.com, and we will see you over on the Den. I'm going to enjoy this weather. Everybody, I hope you do as well. We'll talk with you later. So long.